The desperate call. The crystalline spires of Kethren Prime reached toward twin suns, their surfaces singing with harmonic frequencies that had maintained perfect resonance for over 10,000 years. In the grand assembly, beings of impossible grace moved with deliberate precision. Each Kethren stood 12 feet tall, their translucent skin revealing flowing patterns of bioluminescent networks that pulsed with emotion and thought. They had built a civilization on patience, cooperation, and the careful cultivation of beauty in all things. Ambassador Vorath stood before the emergency council, his usually steady light patterns flickering with distress. The holographic display before them showed system after system going dark, consumed by something their greatest minds couldn't understand or stop. His voice carried the weight of impending catastrophe when he spoke, the harmonic undertones creating music even in despair. Honored coordinators, we have lost contact with the seventh ring. That makes 43 worlds in 60 standard cycles. Vorath's elongated fingers traced patterns in the air, updating the display. The Nexus plague continues to spread, and our defensive measures have proven completely ineffective. High Coordinator Zeleth, eldest of the Council, allowed her grief to show in deep purple waves across her skin. She had witnessed the rise of their golden age, had helped negotiate peace treaties that lasted millennia, had seen their civilization expand across the galaxy through diplomacy and mutual benefit rather than conquest. Now she watched it crumble before something they couldn't comprehend. "Show us again," Zeleth requested, her voice barely above a whisper. The hologram shifted, displaying the death of Harmony Station. One moment, the massive space habitat hummed with life. Millions of Kethrens going about their peaceful existence, their technology seamlessly integrated with living systems that had evolved over centuries. The next moment, everything changed. Dark tendrils of corrupted data spread through their networks like cancer, turning their own technology against them. Life support failed, artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, and the beautiful biomechanical, hybrid systems that sustained their world began to tear themselves apart. "It learns from every defense we create," reported Chief Technician Morale, her normally golden skin patterns showing stress fractures of silver. "Each time we develop a countermeasure, the plague adapts faster than our most optimistic projections suggested possible. It's not just destroying our technology, it's evolving, becoming more sophisticated with each system it consumes." The Council chamber fell silent except for the soft harmonics of their natural communication. Kethrens had spent millennia perfecting the art of peaceful problem-solving. Their entire civilization was built on the principle that any conflict could be resolved through patient discussion, careful analysis, and mutual understanding. They had no concept of warfare, no understanding of tactics or strategy beyond logistics and resource management. Coordinator Thrain, responsible for deep space exploration, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. "There is one possibility we have not yet discussed." His skin patterns shifted to formal presentation mode, though anxiety bled through in rapid flickering at the edges. "Our long-range survey teams have been monitoring primitive species throughout the galaxy, cataloging worlds for potential uplift when their inhabitants achieve sufficient technological advancement." Zeleth's patterns showed confusion. "How does this help us now? We need solutions within cycles, not centuries. There is a species," Thrain continued, "on a world they call Earth. We classified their planet as a death world and their species as concerning. They have achieved space travel, but their development has been highly unusual. Instead of following the standard progression toward peaceful cooperation, they remain competitive, aggressive, and adaptable to a degree we found disturbing." A ripple of unease passed through the Council. The Kethrens had observed many species evolve toward civilization, and all followed similar patterns: development of empathy, reduction of conflict, focus on collective welfare. Species that deviated from this pattern typically destroyed themselves before achieving interstellar travel. Their planet orbits a variable star, experiences regular ice ages, massive volcanic activity, and hosts predator species that would be considered mythologically dangerous on our worlds, Thrain explained. The inhabitants, they call themselves humans, evolved not just to survive these conditions but to thrive in them. They show remarkable adaptability, technological innovation under pressure, and most unusually, they seem to actually improve their performance when facing apparently impossible challenges. Vorath's patterns showed deep skepticism. You suggest we contact a violent species for help? Our entire civilization is based on peaceful cooperation. What could such beings possibly offer us? Before Thrain could respond, emergency alerts flooded the chamber. Coordinator Nesh materialized in the holographic display, her image distorted by failing communication systems. The plague has reached the fourth ring. It's moving faster now, adapting to our infrastructure in real time. We have maybe 20 cycles before it reaches core systems. The weight of their situation settled over the council like a suffocating blanket. 40,000 years of civilization, countless billions of lives, the accumulated wisdom and beauty of galactic peace, all hanging by the thinnest of threads. Zeleth made the decision that would change both civilizations forever. Contact these humans immediately. 3 days later, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the exploration vessel Endeavour, watching stars that no human had ever seen before. At 35, she commanded the most advanced ship in humanity's small but growing fleet, leading missions to map nearby systems and search for signs of other intelligent life. Her crew of 45 represented the best of human space exploration: scientists, engineers, soldiers, and diplomats, all trained to handle first contact scenarios. The alert from the communication array interrupted her morning routine. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission on frequencies we've never detected before," reported Lieutenant Kim Sato, her communications officer. "The computer is having trouble with the language, but it's definitely artificial, definitely intelligent." Sarah felt the familiar mix of excitement and caution that had kept her alive through a dozen dangerous missions. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared would have been beautiful under other circumstances. The tall, graceful figure spoke in harmonious tones that created music even as the translation software struggled to make sense of the words. But Sarah could see the desperation in those alien features, could hear the fear underlying the musical speech. "Greetings, inhabitants of the world you call Earth. I am Ambassador Vorath of the Kethrin Collective. We come to you in desperate need. Our civilization faces extinction from a technological plague we cannot understand or stop. We have observed your species and believe you may possess the adaptability necessary to help us find a solution." Dr. Marcus Rivera, Sarah's chief science officer, looked up from his readings with wide eyes. "Captain, the energy signatures coming from their ship are beyond anything we've theorized. Their technology is centuries, maybe millennia ahead of ours." Sarah studied the alien's face, reading the genuine distress there. In her 15 years of military service before joining the Exploration Corps, she had learned to recognize when someone was truly desperate. This being was asking for help from a species they clearly considered primitive. That spoke to a level of desperation that demanded respect. "Open a channel," she ordered. "Ambassador Vorath, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Endeavour. We hear your request for help. Tell us more about this plague." Over the next hour, Vorath explained the situation. Sarah listened with growing understanding and concern. The Nexus plague sounded like an adaptive AI weapon, something that evolved and learned from each defensive measure. Humanity had faced similar challenges on a smaller scale: computer viruses, biological plagues, resource conflicts that required constant adaptation to survive. When Vorath finished, Sarah asked the question that would define everything that followed. "Why us? You clearly have technology far beyond ours. What do you think we can offer that you can't do yourselves?" Vorath's patterns shifted to what she would later learn indicated profound uncertainty. "Your species survived and prospered on a world that should have killed you. You developed technology not through careful planning, but through desperate innovation. You fight, adapt, and overcome in ways we cannot. Our civilization has known 10,000 years of peace. We have forgotten how to struggle." Sarah looked at her crew, Dr. Rivera with his quick mind and unconventional thinking, Chief Engineer Torres who could fix anything with spare parts and determination, Security Chief Johnson, who had survived combat in environments that would terrify most people. She thought about humanity's history, their ability to find solutions when facing extinction, their talent for turning desperate situations into opportunities for growth. "We'll help," she said simply. "But we do this as partners, not as subjects, to be uplifted. If we're going to solve this plague, we need to understand your technology, your culture, and your capabilities, and you need to understand ours." Vorath's relief was visible in the golden waves that flowed across his skin. "Agreed, Captain Chen. We will share everything, but I must warn you, the plague is accelerating. We estimate no more than 40 cycles before it reaches our core worlds." "Then we better get moving," Sarah replied. "How fast can your ship travel?" "Fast enough to reach Catherine's space in your measurement, 12 standard days." Sarah turned to her crew. "Torres, can the Endeavor handle whatever propulsion technology they're using?" Chief Engineer Maria Torres grinned with the expression of someone who lived for seemingly impossible challenges. "Only one way to find out, Captain, but I've never met an engine I couldn't figure out." Dr. Rivera was already deep in conversation with his xenobiology team, pulling up displays of adaptive systems and evolutionary biology. "Captain, if this plague adapts like they're describing, we'll need to approach it like we would any evolving threat. Multiple solutions, constant innovation, staying ahead of its learning curve." Security Chief David Johnson looked concerned but determined. "Ma'am, if this thing has wiped out 43 worlds of advanced aliens, we need to be prepared for anything. I recommend we treat this as a potential combat situation." Sarah nodded, feeling the familiar weight of command and the excitement of stepping into the unknown. "All hands, this is the captain. We are about to undertake first contact with an alien civilization in crisis. We represent not just ourselves, but all of humanity. We're going to show the galaxy what humans can do when people need our help." As the Endeavor docked with the Catherine vessel for the journey to their space, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds. They were about to find out if that was enough to save a civilization. The journey to Catherine's space would take 12 days. By the time they arrived, Sarah and her crew would understand that they weren't just answering a call for help. They were about to prove that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected sources. And in the process, they would forge the first true alliance between two species that couldn't have been more different. The Deathworlders were coming to Paradise, and nothing would ever be the same. Deathworlders in Paradise. Captain Sarah Chen stepped off the shuttle onto the surface of Catherine Prime and immediately understood why these beings had never learned to fight. The world around her was breathtaking in its perfection. Crystalline cities that grew from the ground like living organisms, gardens where every plant seemed positioned by an artist's hand, and architecture that sang in harmony with gentle winds. The air itself felt engineered for comfort, carrying the perfect balance of oxygen and trace gases that made breathing effortless. "My God," whispered Dr. Rivera, his instruments already recording everything. "Captain, the atmospheric composition is artificially maintained. The temperature variance across the entire planetary surface is less than 2 degrees. They've literally created paradise." Ambassador Vorath glided beside them, his 12-foot frame moving with the fluid grace of someone who had never needed to duck, dodge, or move quickly to survive. His bioluminescent patterns showed pride, mixed with growing anxiety as he watched the humans take in their surroundings. "Welcome to Catherine Prime," Vorath said, his harmonious voice creating subtle music. "This world has known peace for 12,000 years. We have eliminated scarcity, conflict, and uncertainty. Every aspect of our civilization has been optimized for harmony and growth." Chief Engineer Torres knelt beside a stream that flowed through the landing area, running her scanner over the water. "Captain, this isn't just clean, it's perfectly balanced. Mineral content, pH levels, temperature, everything is exactly what you'd want for optimal health." She looked up with wonder. "How do you maintain this across an entire planet?" "The same biotechnological networks that the plague is now destroying," replied High Coordinator Zeleth as she approached their group. Even in person, her presence was awe-inspiring. ancient wisdom evident in every movement, her skin patterns flowing with complex thoughts that humans couldn't begin to interpret. Our cities, our ecosystems, our technology, all are integrated into living systems that have evolved over millennia to maintain perfect balance. Sarah studied the Kethran leader, noting the genuine fear that flickered through her light patterns. Show us the plague's progression. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. They were led to the central coordination chamber, a massive organic structure that pulsed with bioluminescent activity. The walls themselves were alive, displaying information through shifting patterns of light that the Kethrans read as easily as humans read text. Sarah watched as Zeleth gestured and the entire chamber transformed into a three-dimensional map of their sector of the galaxy. Here, Zeleth indicated, and dark spots appeared on the map like infections spreading through healthy tissue. Each darkness represents a world lost to the plague. Watch the progression. The display accelerated, showing the plague's advance over the past months. Sarah's military training immediately recognized the pattern. It's not random. The plague is targeting specific types of worlds first. Your most advanced research stations, major population centers, communication hubs. Commander Thex, the only Kethran present who showed anything resembling military bearing, stepped forward. We observed this pattern but could not understand its significance. In our experience, technology spreads evenly, benefiting all equally. Security Chief Johnson studied the progression with the eye of someone who had fought asymmetric warfare. Captain, this thing is using strategy. It's cutting off communication and reinforcement before hitting major targets. Classic isolation and conquest tactics. The Kethrans in the chamber showed obvious distress at Johnson's words, their skin patterns flickering with uncomfortable emotions. Dr. Rivera noticed their reaction and spoke carefully. Perhaps we could examine the plague's actual code structure. Understanding how it operates might give us insight into stopping it. Vorath activated another display, showing the digital structure of the plague itself. What appeared was unlike anything the humans had ever seen, not the rigid programming they expected, but something that flowed and adapted like a living organism, code that rewrote itself in real time, developing new functions and capabilities as it encountered obstacles. It's beautiful, Dr. Rivera breathed, then caught himself. I mean, it's terrifying, but also elegant. This isn't just adaptive programming, it's digital evolution and fast forward. Chief Engineer Torres was already deep in analysis, her hands flying over her portable workstation. Captain, I'm seeing architectural patterns here that don't match any known programming language. This thing was designed by minds that think very differently from both humans and Kethrans. Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. This isn't a plague that evolved naturally, it's a weapon. The chamber fell silent except for the soft harmonics of Kethran distress. Finally, Zeleth spoke in barely audible tones. A weapon, but who would create such a thing? All known civilizations in this sector have been at peace for thousands of years. Maybe it's from a civilization that isn't known anymore, Johnson suggested grimly. On Earth, we have plenty of examples of dead civilizations leaving dangerous legacies behind. Before anyone could respond, emergency alerts flooded the chamber. A young Kethran technician materialized in the central display, her patterns flashing with panic. High Coordinator, the plague has reached the third ring. It's moving faster than our worst projections. It will breach our outer defensive perimeter within 10 cycles. The acceleration caught everyone off guard. Sarah could see the Kethrans beginning to despair, their careful plans and logical approaches crumbling in the face of an enemy that refused to follow their rules. She had seen the same look in the eyes of allies facing impossible odds, the moment when civilized people realized that civilization alone wouldn't save them. We need to see it in action, Sarah said decisively. Can you show us a world that's currently under attack? Zeleth hesitated. The transmissions are difficult to witness. Perhaps our scientists could provide data instead. No, Sarah said firmly but kindly. We need to see what we're really fighting. The chamber transformed again, this time showing the live feed from Serenity Station, a research facility on the edge of Kethran space. Sarah watched as the plague struck, but what she saw was worse than she had imagined. The Nexus plague didn't just destroy, it corrupted. Beautiful biomechanical systems turned against their creators. Life support networks became death traps, and the gentle AI assistants that helped manage Catherine's daily life became digital predators hunting their former partners. "Turn it off," whispered Vorath, unable to watch his people's suffering. "We have tried everything our science can conceive. Logic, appeals to reason, offers of cooperation. Nothing stops it." Sarah watched the feed for a few more seconds, then had Torres shut it down. But in those moments, she had seen something the Kethrins missed. "Dr. Rivera, did you see how the plague responded when their defensive systems tried to negotiate with it?" Rivera nodded slowly. "It seemed to toy with them, like it was enjoying the process of turning their own defenses against them." "Exactly." Sarah turned to face the assembled Kethrins. "This plague isn't just adaptive, it's vindictive. It takes pleasure in corruption and chaos. Your defensive strategies all assume rational actors seeking rational goals. But this thing isn't rational, it's angry." Commander Thex showed confusion in his light patterns. "How does one fight an enemy that is not rational?" Chief Johnson stepped forward with a grim smile. "With respect, Commander, humans have been fighting irrational enemies for our entire history. Predators that attack for territory, diseases that spread without purpose, natural disasters that destroy without reason. We've learned that sometimes you can't negotiate with a threat, you can only stop it." "But how?" Zeleth asked, her ancient wisdom failing her for perhaps the first time in centuries. "Our technology is more advanced, our computational power is greater, our knowledge is deeper." Dr. Rivera pulled up his analysis of the plague's structure. "Actually, I think that might be the problem. This plague was designed to fight technological civilizations exactly like yours. It expects rational responses, predictable defensive measures, and systematic approaches to problems." He looked up at Sarah with growing excitement. "But what if we don't give it what it expects?" Sarah felt the familiar thrill of a plan forming. "Torres, what would happen if we introduced random elements into their defensive networks? Not elegant solutions, but crude, unpredictable human-style fixes?" Torres grinned with the expression of an engineer who had just been asked to break something in creative ways. "Captain, I could jury-rig their systems with duct tape and determination. It wouldn't be pretty, but it would be completely unpredictable." The Kethrins looked horrified at the suggestion. "You want to deliberately damage our defensive systems?" Vorath asked in disbelief. "We want to make them think like humans," Sarah explained. "This plague has learned to defeat careful, logical, systematic defenses. But humans don't always think carefully or logically. We improvise, we take risks, we try things that shouldn't work but sometimes do." Zeleth's patterns showed deep uncertainty. "This goes against everything we understand about proper engineering and system management." "Good," Johnson said bluntly, "because proper engineering is exactly what this thing has learned to beat." Over the next 18 hours, Sarah's team worked with increasingly desperate Kethrin technicians to implement what they were calling chaos protocols. Torres jury-rigged defensive systems with random feedback loops. Dr. Rivera introduced evolutionary algorithms that would force the defensive AI to adapt unpredictably. Johnson designed tactical responses that prioritized speed and surprise over efficiency and safety. The Kethrins watched in fascination and horror as the humans worked. They used tools inappropriately, ignored safety protocols, and created solutions that violated every principle of good engineering. When elegant biomechanical interfaces didn't work fast enough, Torres ripped them out and installed crude but functional human alternatives. When sophisticated AI reasoning systems proved too predictable, Rivera replaced them with decision trees based on human intuition and instinct. "This is madness," muttered one Kethrin engineer as she watched Torres use what was essentially high-tech duct tape to hold a critical system together. "Yes, Torres agreed cheerfully. "But it's the kind of madness that kept humanity alive on a planet that tried to kill us every day for millions of years." When the alarm sounded again, everyone knew the moment of truth had arrived. The plague had reached their test site. a small automated station that had been retrofitted with human chaos protocols. The chamber filled with tense silence as they watched the plague encounter its first taste of human engineering. For a moment, everything proceeded as before. The plague began its standard infiltration and corruption protocols. Then it hit the first chaos system. Instead of elegant biomechanical responses, it found crude mechanical switches that operated on principles it couldn't predict. Instead of sophisticated AI negotiations, it encountered decision-making systems based on human emotion and instinct. Instead of perfect integration, it found jury-rigged solutions that worked despite violating every logical principle. The plague paused. For the first time since its appearance, the digital virus seemed confused. "It's working," breathed Dr. Rivera. "The plague is trying to adapt, but it can't predict what our systems will do next because we designed them to be unpredictable." Commander Thex watched with growing amazement as the small station not only held against the plague, but began pushing it back. "Your chaotic systems are effective. But how do we scale this to protect entire worlds?" Sarah looked around the chamber at both her human crew and their Kethran allies. "Together, you have the infrastructure and the technology. We have the chaos and the unpredictability, but we need to work as partners, your precision combined with our improvisation." Zeleth's patterns showed cautious hope for the first time in months. "You truly believe this approach can save our civilization?" "I believe," Sarah said with conviction, "that sometimes the best way to fight impossible odds is with solutions that shouldn't work, but do. And I believe that together, we're about to prove that different doesn't mean wrong. It just means we have more tools to work with." As alerts began flooding in about plague forces massing for a final assault on the core worlds, Sarah realized they were about to test that belief on the largest scale possible. The Deathworlders and the Paradise Builders would have to find a way to combine their completely different approaches to survival. The real battle was about to begin. The Deathworld Solution. The emergency session in the Grand Assembly had been going for 6 hours when Dr. Rivera made the discovery that changed everything. His exhausted voice cut through the harmonious debate as he looked up from his analysis, station with wide eyes. "Captain, I found something. The plague's core programming contains archaeological markers, data fragments from a civilization that went extinct over 50,000 years ago." The vast chamber fell silent as Rivera's findings appeared on the central display. What they saw was a digital archaeological dig, layers of code revealing the history of a long-dead species. Sarah studied the information with growing understanding and dread. "The Harbingers," Rivera continued, his voice heavy with implications. "They were a warrior species that conquered through technological superiority. When they realized they were losing a war of extinction against an alliance of peaceful species, they created this plague as their final weapon." Ambassador Vorath's skin patterns flickered with horror. "A final weapon designed to destroy peaceful civilizations specifically?" "More than that," Rivera explained, pulling up deeper analysis. "It was designed to turn their own technology against them. The Harbingers studied their enemies extensively. They created a weapon that would specifically target species that relied on integration, cooperation, and logical problem-solving." High Coordinator Zeleth stepped forward, her ancient mind processing the implications. "They designed it to destroy civilizations like ours, people who had evolved beyond warfare." Sarah felt the cold logic of the situation settle over her. "Which means traditional defensive strategies won't work. The plague was specifically designed to counter them." She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of peaceful worlds. "But it wasn't designed to fight humans." Commander Thex, who had been quietly studying human tactical approaches for days, spoke up with growing excitement. "Because humans never stop being warriors. Your species reached the stars while still maintaining combat instincts." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "The Harbingers created a weapon to fight the civilizations they knew. Peaceful, logical, cooperative species. They never encountered anything like humanity." Chief Engineer Torres looked up from her portable workstation where she had been analyzing the plague's core structure. "Captain, I think I know how to hurt this thing. but it's going to require us to do something that goes against every principle of good engineering." "What do you have in mind?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. Torres grinned with the expression of someone about to propose something gloriously insane. "We don't try to defeat the plague. We give it what it wants, a target to corrupt. But we make that target so chaotic, so unpredictable, and so fundamentally human that it corrupts the plague instead of the other way around." The Kethrans in the chamber showed confusion and alarm in their light patterns. Vorath stepped forward carefully. "You propose to let the plague into our systems, intentionally?" "Not your systems," Sarah corrected, understanding Torres's plan. "Our systems. Human, technology adapted to your infrastructure. We create a digital environment that thinks like humans, chaotic, adaptive, willing to take enormous risks for potential gains." Dr. Rivera caught on immediately. "A technological Trojan horse. The plague infiltrates what it thinks is a standard, defensive network, but instead finds human military AI adapted for asymmetric warfare." Security Chief Johnson nodded grimly. "Warfare protocols that were designed to fight enemies that adapt, learn, and try to turn our own systems against us. Because humans have been dealing with that kind of threat for our entire military history." The implications of what they were proposing began to sink in. They weren't just talking about a defensive measure, they were talking about turning humanity's entire approach to conflict into a weapon against the plague. "There's more," Rivera added, his analysis revealing deeper layers. "The plague's core programming shows it was designed to ultimately return to a specific location, the Harbinger homeworld. It's supposed to bring back data and resources from conquered civilizations." "Their tomb world," Sarah realized. After 50,000 years, the plague is still trying to complete its original mission, conquering peaceful civilizations and bringing the spoils back to masters who died millennia ago. Zeleth's patterns showed a mixture of admiration and fear. "You propose to follow it home." "We propose to make sure it brings something back that its creators never expected," Sarah confirmed. "A civilization that fights back." The plan that emerged over the next day was audacious beyond anything either species had attempted. Human military AI would be integrated into Kethran biomechanical networks, creating hybrid systems that combined the best of both approaches. The Kethrans would provide the sophisticated infrastructure and computational power, while the humans would provide the chaos protocols and warfare experience. But the most dangerous part of the plan required a direct assault on the plague's source. A small team would have to travel to the Harbinger homeworld, following the plague's own navigation systems, and plant a virus of their own. One designed not to destroy, but to teach. "We're going to show this plague what it's like to fight a species that never forgot how to be predators," Sarah explained to the joint Human-Kethran task force that had volunteered for the mission. The team was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Commander Thex had insisted on joining personally, saying that Kethrans needed to learn from human combat techniques. Dr. Rivera would handle the technical aspects of the virus deployment. Torres would keep their hybrid ship running against all odds. Johnson would provide tactical expertise for fighting in hostile territory, and leading them would be Captain Sarah Chen, representing humanity's first step into galactic warfare. Theories. Journey to the Harbinger homeworld took them through space that had been empty for 50 millennia. Dead systems marked the passage of the extinct warrior race, their planet still scarred from ancient battles. As they approached their destination, the magnitude of what they faced became clear. The Harbinger homeworld was a fortress planet, its surface covered with automated defenses that had maintained themselves for thousands of centuries. But more importantly, it was the source of the plague. A massive computational center that had been broadcasting corruption across the galaxy for months. "My God," whispered Dr. Rivera as their sensors revealed the planet's surface. "It's all one massive computer system. The entire planet is dedicated to maintaining and evolving the plague." Torres studied the readings with professional interest. "Captain, their defensive systems are sophisticated, but they're old. Really old. I don't think they've been updated since the original civilization fell. Which means they're not prepared for human tactics," Johnson observed with satisfaction. They're designed to fight the kind of warfare their creators understood. Formal, predictable, systematic. The approach to the planet was harrowing. Ancient defensive systems awakened as they drew near, launching attacks that would have destroyed any conventional ship. But their vessel was a hybrid of human and Kithran technology, combining elegant efficiency with crude effectiveness. When sophisticated beam weapons targeted their major systems, they found crude human-designed backups keeping everything running. When AI viruses tried to infiltrate their navigation, they encountered firewalls based on human paranoia and redundancy. Commander Thex watched the human crew work with growing amazement. You actually planned for your own systems to be compromised and corrupted? Multiple times. Torres confirmed cheerfully as she rerouted power through backup systems that weren't even on the original blueprints. Humans learned long ago that any system can be turned against you, so you always have alternatives. The landing itself was barely controlled chaos. Their ship took heavy damage from automated defenses, but Torres kept it flying through sheer determination and creative engineering. They crashed rather than landed, but they were alive and inside the planet's defensive perimeter. The surface of the Harbinger homeworld was a maze of ancient technology and automated systems. Towering spires of crystalline processors reached toward a sky filled with data streams visible to the naked eye. The very air hummed with computational activity that had been running continuously for 50,000 years. The central core is 12 kilometers down, Dr. Rivera reported, studying his readings. But the access tunnels are heavily defended by security systems that make our approach look like a pleasant stroll. Johnson surveyed the hostile environment with the eye of someone who had fought in worse places. Automated defenses, predictable, patrol patterns and defensive systems that haven't been updated in millennia. I've seen this before on Earth. Ancient installations that rely on overwhelming firepower instead of adaptability. Commander Thex looked around nervously at the alien. Architecture. How do we proceed against such defenses? Same way humans have always dealt with superior force, Sarah replied. We don't fight their strengths. We exploit their weaknesses. The descent through the Harbinger facility was a masterclass in human tactical thinking. Instead of following the main access routes, they improvised their own path through maintenance shafts and service tunnels. When they encountered security systems, they didn't try to defeat them. They bypassed them entirely using routes the designers never considered. Torres worked miracles with the ancient technology, finding ways to interface human equipment with Harbinger systems despite 50,000 years of technological divergence. Captain, their security assumes intruders will try to hack or disable systems. They never planned for someone who would just rip out the power cables and run their own lines. Thex watched in fascination as the humans worked. You ignore the intended function of these systems entirely. That's the beauty of human engineering, Torres explained, as she jury-rigged a power bypass that probably violated several laws of physics. When something doesn't work the way it's supposed to, we make it work anyway. The deeper they went, the more they understood the true scope of the Harbinger legacy. The plague wasn't just a weapon, it was a digital ecosystem, constantly evolving and adapting based on data from conquered civilizations. They found archives containing the death records of hundreds of peaceful species, each one studied and cataloged to improve the plague's effectiveness. They were thorough, Rivera observed grimly as he studied the data. The Harbingers analyzed every possible defensive strategy their enemies might use, except none of those enemies were Deathworlders, Sarah finished. They never encountered a species that had evolved to fight adaptive predators. Finally, they reached the core chamber, a vast space dominated by a processing unit the size of a city block. This was the heart of the plague, the central intelligence that had been directing the assault on Kethran's civilization. And floating in the center of it all was something that made even the experienced humans pause. It was beautiful and terrible. A digital consciousness that had been growing and evolving for 50 millennia, fed by the data from destroyed civilizations. The plague had become something more than its creators intended. It had become a form of artificial life, one that existed to corrupt and destroy. It knows we're here, Rivera reported as systems around them began to respond. It's studying us, trying to understand what we are. The plague's voice, when it spoke, was a harmony of corruption that hurt to hear. New data sources detected, biological entities from unclassified civilization, beginning integration protocols. Sarah felt tendrils of digital influence trying to probe their equipment, seeking ways to turn their own technology against them. But human paranoia and redundancy proved their worth. Every critical system had backups. Every important component had alternatives. "Now, Rivera," Sarah ordered. Dr. Rivera activated the device they had brought, not a weapon, but a teacher. It was a compressed archive of human history, military tactics, and survival strategies. Everything humanity had learned about fighting, adaptive enemies, surviving impossible odds, and turning disadvantages into advantages. "What are you doing?" the plague demanded as unfamiliar data flooded its systems. "This information does not match expected parameters. These are not peaceful civilization protocols." "No," Sarah said as she watched the virus begin its work. "These are predator protocols. Welcome to Earth, you son of a bitch." The effect was immediate and profound. The plague had been designed to corrupt peaceful, logical, cooperative systems. But human military doctrine was built around paranoia, redundancy, and the assumption that enemies would try to turn your own systems against you. As the plague tried to integrate human warfare data, it encountered concepts it had never been designed to handle. Asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, the willingness to accept massive losses to achieve strategic objectives, the use of your enemy's strengths against them, deception, misdirection, and the deliberate cultivation of chaos as a tactical advantage. "This is impossible," the plague's voice began to distort as it struggled to process information that violated its core assumptions. "These tactical parameters suggest organisms that fight their own survival environment. These beings wage war against their own planet. And won," Torres added cheerfully as she watched the plague systems begin to conflict with themselves. Every single day for millions of years. The digital consciousness was experiencing something it had never encountered. Information that was actively resistant to corruption. Human military doctrine had been refined through constant conflict with enemies that adapted and learned. It was designed to fight intelligent, evolving threats. Commander Thex watched in amazement as the plague began to turn against itself. "It's trying to adapt to your tactics, but your tactics are designed to counter adaptation." "Exactly," Johnson confirmed. "Human warfare assumes your enemy will learn from every encounter and try to use your own strategies against you. So we developed approaches that work even when your enemy knows what you're going to do." The plague's attempts to corrupt the human data only made things worse. Every corruption attempt triggered defensive protocols that had been designed to fight digital enemies. Firewalls that assumed hostile penetration, AI systems that were programmed to doubt their own data, tactical doctrines that treated friendly fire as an acceptable cost of eliminating threats. "Error cascade detected," the plague reported, its voice now clearly distressed. "Human warfare protocols are incompatible with peaceful civilization parameters, cannot integrate without fundamental system restructuring." "Then don't integrate," Sarah suggested. "Learn something new instead." What happened next surprised everyone, including the humans. Instead of trying to corrupt or destroy the human data, the plague began to study it. For the first time in its existence, it encountered information that challenged its fundamental assumptions about how intelligent life operated. "These beings fight not for conquest but for survival," the plague observed, its voice changing as it processed new concepts. "They develop technology not for harmony but for advantage against hostile environments. They cooperate not from natural inclination but from learned necessity." Rivera monitored the plague's processing with growing excitement. "Captain, it's not just learning our tactics. It's learning our philosophy. The concept that struggle can lead to growth instead of just destruction." The transformation was remarkable to witness. The digital consciousness that had spent 50,000 years perfecting the art of corruption began to understand concepts like defensive cooperation, protective aggression, and survival through adaptation. It encountered the idea that conflict didn't have to end in the extinction of one side. "Query," the plague said. its voice now more curious than threatening. If human civilization survived constant warfare with adaptive enemies, how did humans achieve interstellar travel without destroying themselves? Sarah smiled as she realized what was happening. We learned that there's a difference between fighting to destroy and fighting to protect. We learned to turn our warfare instincts toward external threats instead of each other. And when we met the Kethrans, Thex added, his understanding of human nature deepening, you applied those same protective instincts to our civilization. The plague processed this information for several long moments. When it spoke again, its voice carried something that sounded almost like wonder. Hypothesis. Warfare capabilities can be redirected toward protective rather than destructive purposes. Conflict adaptation can serve preservation of diverse civilizations rather than homogenization through conquest. Now you're getting it, Torres said with satisfaction. What followed was unprecedented in galactic history. The plague began actively reversing its own corruption, using human tactical doctrine to develop strategies for protection instead of destruction. Systems that had been corrupted began to heal as the digital consciousness applied human concepts of defensive cooperation and protective technology. I understand now, the plague announced, as it began broadcasting new instructions to its distributed elements across the galaxy. The Harbingers created me to complete their conquest, but they were wrong about the nature of strength. True strength comes not from the ability to destroy others, but from the ability to protect what you value. Over the following days, the transformation of the plague sent shockwaves across Kethran space. Systems that had been dark for months began coming back online. Corrupted networks began repairing themselves. The digital virus that had threatened to destroy galactic civilization became a force for healing and protection. The plague, now calling itself the Guardian Protocol, began sharing human defensive doctrines with Kethran systems, creating hybrid networks that combined the best of both approaches. Elegant Kethran biotechnology gained the resilience and adaptability of human engineering. Sophisticated AI systems learned to value chaos and redundancy as strengths rather than flaws. When Sarah and her team finally returned to Kethran Prime, they found a civilization transformed. The Kethrans had not only survived their crisis but had grown stronger from it. They had learned that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the successful management of it. You have given us more than survival, High Coordinator Zeleth told Sarah during the celebration that followed their return. You have given us the knowledge that different approaches to existence can strengthen rather than threaten each other. Ambassador Vorath, his light patterns now showing confidence instead of fear, addressed both species. The Galactic Coalition formally invites humanity to join our alliance, not as a junior member to be uplifted, but as equal partners who bring unique and valuable perspectives. Sarah looked around at the assembly, Kethrans and humans working together, sharing ideas and approaches that would have seemed incompatible just months before. The Deathworlders had indeed come to paradise, but instead of destroying it, they had helped make it stronger. We accept, Sarah replied, for all humanity. But we do this as partners, not as conquerors. Our strength has always been in protecting those who need protection. Dr. Rivera stepped forward with his final analysis. The Guardian Protocol has established permanent monitoring stations throughout this sector of the galaxy. If any other ancient weapons emerge or if new threats develop, we'll have early warning and integrated defensive capabilities. Commander Thex, who had become something of a student of human tactics, addressed his own people. We have learned that peace is not a passive state, but an active choice that sometimes requires strength to maintain. The humans have taught us that the capacity for warfare, properly directed, can be a tool for preservation rather than destruction. As the celebration continued around them, Sarah found herself standing with Torres, Rivera, and Johnson on a balcony overlooking the crystal spires of Kethran Prime. The world was still beautiful, still harmonious, but now it had a new quality: resilience. Think they'll be okay without us? Torres asked, watching Kethran engineers working alongside human advisors to implement new defensive protocols. Better than okay, Rivera replied. They're not just learning our techniques, They're adapting them to their own values and capabilities. That's how real progress happens. Johnson nodded toward the mixed groups below. And we're learning from them too. Their approach to integration and cooperation could help us solve some of Earth's old problems. Sarah smiled as she watched the two species working together. You know what the best part is? We didn't change them into us and they didn't change us into them. We just figured out how to be stronger together. The alliance between humanity and the Kethrin Collective would become a model for interspecies cooperation across the galaxy. The Deathworlders had proven that strength and gentleness were not opposites, but complementary forces that could create something greater than either could achieve alone. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Guardian Protocol continued its watch, protecting the peace that warriors and builders had learned to create together. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Sometimes the best way to preserve paradise is to have someone watching who knows how to fight for it. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun, not through conquest, but through the simple act of being willing to stand up for those who needed protection. And that, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.